Mafia meeting, Jimmy Hoffa muttered, slamming the car door outside the Machus Red Fox restaurant, Bloomfield Township, July 30th, 1975, 2:45 p.m. The Teamsters kingpin straightened his sport coat, checked the time. He was early. He believed the sit-down with mob captains Tony Pro Provenzano and Tony Jack Giacalone would put him back on the Union throne. But when he stepped through the glass doors, he crossed into the last known frame of his life. 20 minutes later, a waitress glanced at his empty booth. Hoffa's ice water sweated rings on the Formica. Outside, two motorists remembered seeing him pacing the sidewalk, furious, waving a rotary dial phone cord he'd yanked from the payphone. At 3:10 a.m., the reservation ledger shows his name boxed, then hastily scribbled out. No one claims they saw him leave. And just 20 minutes after that, on a quiet suburban road 7 miles south, police found an abandoned maroon Mercury Marquis, one window smeared with a faint, palm-wide blot of blood, seat adjusted forward for a shorter driver. No keys, no prints, no Hoffa. The sedan belonged to Joe Giacalone, Tony Jack's son. It was the only physical trace ever tied to that meeting. Hoffa was more than a labor boss. He was a walking balance sheet of secrets. Which congressman took which union donation, which trucking firm laundered which mob dollar, which casino skim-fed whose campaign. He had done 7 years in Lewisburg for jury tampering and still walked taller than governors. But power fades fastest when it's owed in favors. That Wednesday, he carried a list of debts only he could pay or collect. In the next 40 minutes, we'll rewind his final 24 hours, follow the calls to Provenzano's prison payphone, map the route of the Marquis, unseal FBI wiretaps, and dig through 3 decades of rumored graves, from Detroit's Zug Island furnaces to a 1980s Giants Stadium end zone. Every name, every shovel, every leak brings us back to a single question. What deal went sideways in that restaurant? And who walked Hoffa out the door forever? Sunrise over Detroit, July 30, 1975. Painted the Ambassador Bridge gold while Jimmy Hoffa was already on the phone. He sat in his modest Lake Orion cottage, pouring thick coffee, barking orders through a spiral cord stretched taut. Even in exile, he kept a mental Rolodex of mayors, foremen, and bookies. One growl could reroute 50 semis by lunch. At 8:05 a.m., he reminded an Ohio terminal manager that dues were overdue, punctuating the threat with a half-smile his wife Josephine called the sermon. A minute later, he rang his foster son Chucky O'Brien, the trusted aide who once chauffeured him everywhere. O'Brien said he was tied up hauling salmon for a friend. Hoffa cursed, then told him to meet at Red Fox by 3. Next, he called Tony Jack Giacalone's headquarters, a dingy office above a produce market. Giacalone wasn't in, but Hoffa left a message. "Tell him I'll be on time. No games." By 10 o'clock, he donned a sport coat, blue tie, and wedged a folded list of bargaining chips into his breast pocket. Pension fund leverage, promises of restored loan channels, hints of what he might reveal to Senate investigators if shut out. He told Josephine he'd be home for dinner, kissed her on the cheek, and drove his green Pontiac Grandville south toward Detroit. Traffic cam logs show his license plate passing the Lodge Freeway at 1:22 p.m. He detoured to the Teamsters Local 299 Hall, shaking hands with old loyalists in a haze of cigarette smoke. Surveillance agents tailing him noted his upbeat stride. He believed this meeting would seal his comeback against Frank Fitzsimmons. At 2:15, he exited, stopped at a gas station, used a payphone that recorded a 3-minute outgoing call to a New Jersey number, traced to Provenzano's brother Sal. FBI wiretap transcripts later quote Provenzano shouting, "He'd better show respect." Hoffa slammed the receiver hard enough to crack plastic. By 2:30, he turned onto Maple Road toward the Red Fox lot, unaware 2 men in a maroon Mercury Marquis had arrived minutes earlier. Hoffa parked, checked his watch, and stepped into the July heat, the weight of a union and a lifetime of favors pressing against the silk lining of his coat. Hoffa pushed through the glass door of Machus Red Fox at exactly 2:45 p.m., the maitre d' recalling later that he flashed a tight grin and said, "Table for 3, name's Hoffa, they're late." He took a booth near the front window, facing the parking lot like a man expecting a show. A waitress left ice water. He ordered a small steak rare and settled into the leather seat. tapping his wedding band on the formica in a steady metronome. Across the lot, a young salesman named Ronald Cadwell waited in his Chevy and watched the notorious labor boss check his watch again and again. Cadwell glanced away to finish paperwork, looked back, and the booth was empty. No more than 10 minutes had passed. Inside, the hostess assumed Hoffa had gone to the payphone tucked beside the restrooms. That phone recorded one outgoing local call at 2:56 p.m. to the Giacalone produce office. A secretary heard Hoffa bark, "Where the hell are your guys?" The line clicked dead. He returned to the lobby, paced in front of the window, waved to Cadwell as if signaling someone behind him, then strode outside, leaving the steak half-cooked on the grill. 2 witnesses saw him approach a dark green Pontiac Grandville, similar to his own, parked 3 spaces over. One said the car's rear door opened from inside. Hoffa leaned in, spoke briefly, then straightened. Face flush. A maroon Mercury Marquis rolled up. Hoffa stepped toward it, hesitated, then appeared to climb into the back seat. The witnesses disagreed on whether he sat or was nudged. Both agreed the sedan pulled out smoothly, no screech, merging into Maple Road traffic at 3:05 p.m. At 3:27 p.m., a Bloomfield Hills patrolman tagged that same Marquis abandoned on Fairway Drive, engine warm, keys missing, seat pushed forward. A single palm-sized blood blot marked the passenger window. It matched Type O, Hoffa's blood group, but contamination and evaporation erased comparison before lab techs could confirm. By 4 p.m., agents circulated Hoffa's description to every Michigan trooper, yet the critical 20-minute window between 2:45 and 3:05 hardened like cement. A table, a phone call, a sedan, and then nothing but exhaust hanging over suburban pavement. Within an hour of Hoffa's disappearance, phone lines across 3 states crackled with coded chatter. At 4:12 p.m., a call from Tony Provenzano's New Jersey office pinged a payphone near Detroit's Renaissance Center. 750 miles in 2 seconds was impossible without a relay. Investigators believed an associate dialed on his behalf to create confusion. 10 minutes later, Provenzano himself phoned Teamsters Local 560, snarling that he'd been stood up by the little guy. Wiretap agents transcribed the phrase twice, suspecting he was building an alibi. Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone, meanwhile, spent the afternoon visible on purpose. FBI surveillance logs show him at Southfield Athletic Club from 3:30 to 5:45 p.m. playing cards under a glaring fluorescent light. He winked at agents, lifted a Coke, and said, "Hot day for tailing, boys." The performance screamed innocence yet reeked of staging. Mob protocol dictated a boss be on camera while a hit unfolded. By dusk, Hoffa's foster son, Chucky O'Brien, surfaced, borrowing a friend's Mercury for deliveries. Agents pulled him over. The trunk smelled faintly of fish. He'd hauled salmon earlier, but cadaver dogs signaled on trunk fibers. O'Brien insisted the smell was seafood. Tests later showed decomposition enzymes mixed with fish oil, muddying results and reputations. O'Brien remained under suspicion for decades, a loyal son torn between stepfather and underworld patrons. Reporters swarmed Bloomfield Township Police. Chief William Taco muttered, "Somebody's playing chess, and we're pawns." The Detroit Free Press ran an early edition headline, "Hoffa last seen at mob restaurant, turning uncertainty into fact overnight." Talk radio callers spun theories, buried under Renaissance Center concrete, dissolved in an acid drum, shipped in frozen meat to Brazil. Each rumor sprouted its own family tree of guys who know a guy, flooding tip lines until operators stapled notes directly into trash cans to keep desks clear. Inside FBI headquarters, Special Agent Andrew Sluss drew a triangle on a chalkboard: Hoffa, Provenzano, Giacalone. He circled the center and wrote, "Pension, $signed," in red. The entire investigation would orbit that pension fund. $1.4 billion in 1975 money, fuel for casinos, trucking monopolies, and political bribes. If Hoffa threatened to expose the skim, the triangle's sides would snap shut like a bear trap. The only question, where did they stash the bite marks? The Bureau activated Major Case 0047 at 6 p.m. Agents fanned out from Machus Red Fox in widening concentric circles, interviewing dishwashers, pensioners walking dogs, teenagers tossing frisbees. A helicopter thudded overhead, its rotor wash bending maples as infrared sensors scanned yards for fresh-turned soil. Agents kicked in doors of vacant houses, shining flashlights over cobwebbed carpet, finding raccoon scat instead of ransom notes. Each hour without Hoffa felt like wet cement drying. Chucky O'Brien became suspect 1. Polygraph day, August 1st. Electrodes taped to his sweaty arms. He claimed he spent the afternoon handing out fish to Teamster friends. Needle spikes said deception, but polygraphers knew nerves mimic guilt. Later, an agent dusted O'Brien's borrowed mercury again and found a single blonde hair under the seat rail. Lab techs tried mitochondrial extraction, but the strand had no root. Results: inconclusive. The phrase already haunted every memo. Meanwhile, Provenzano, paroled yet still a capo, sat for interrogation at Rahway State Prison, where he visited parole officers weekly. He smirked through 27 questions, invoked the 5th on 26. The only answer he gave: "I didn't like the midget anyway." Agents left with a tape of forced silence and one insult. Giacalone was smoother. He produced golf receipts, membership logs, even Polaroids of himself at the club on July 30th, smiling beside a clock. Analysts suspected the images were staged earlier and time-stamped in the darkroom, but proving it meant catching the forger. On August 3rd, the FBI drained a farm pond near Milford after an informant whispered Hoffa was mixed in concrete shoes and dumped. Muddy pumps choked on cattails. Divers surfaced holding nothing but turtle shells and a rusted bike frame. 2 days later, tips placed Hoffa in Windsor, across the Canadian border, so customs officers halted every truck hauling meat, grain, or scrap. Dogs sniffed pallets. Workers sweated. Border queues stretched miles. Still nothing. Back in Washington, Director Clarence Kelly faced reporters. "We are throwing the kitchen sink in the oven at this." Behind him, a chalkboard showed 64 agents assigned, 175 interviews, 12 search warrants, 0 bodies, 0 crime scenes. A perfect circle of motion without momentum. Every lead felt sharp until it snapped in their hands, leaving investigators with chalk dust and a question echoing off empty basements. How do you solve a murder when you can't prove a death? Inside Teamsters Local 299, the air smelled of stale coffee and panic. Acting President Frank Fitzsimmons, Hoffa's one-time ally turned rival, paced behind his oversized desk, while underboss Roland Red Massa shredded outdated loan ledgers. Those ledgers detailed casino loans funneled through Vegas, each signed off by Hoffa during his reign. If the FBI saw them now, pension fund arrests could unravel the entire union hierarchy. Massa stuffed the strips into a trash bag, muttered that Hoffa's ghost was already costing them money, and ordered a janitor to burn it behind the loading dock that night. Whispers grew that Hoffa had drafted a nuclear letter, a sealed envelope naming every congressman, capo, and banker who skimmed pension cash. Josephine Patz, the union's longtime secretary, swore she saw Hoffa slide a thick envelope into his breast pocket the morning he vanished. The desk drawer where Hoffa kept personal files was now empty. Keyhole pried. Agents dusted for prints. Only Fitzsimmons' oily swirls appeared. He claimed he was keeping the office clean. On August 10th, an informant known only as BG told the Bureau Hoffa planned to freeze pension disbursement unless Provenzano backed his reinstatement. The threat would choke mob cash flow within weeks. BG added that a Chicago outfit fixer flew to Detroit on July 28th with a single instruction: no freeze. The name on the airline manifest, Charles Chucky Nicoletti, matched a known hitman. Nicoletti returned to Chicago July 31st, checked into a motel, and left again at dawn. Hotel staff smelled antiseptic in his room, like a makeshift cleanup. No fingerprints, no fibers, just a half-emptied ice bucket. Witnesses who might clarify these timelines kept their mouths zipped. One truck dispatcher found a bullet in his mailbox. Another received a single black rose. When the FBI subpoenaed union accountant Alan Dorfman, he arrived with lawyers and answered every question with, "I don't recall." Private conversations, however, caught on a hidden recorder, revealed him saying, "Jimmy had 2 choices, back down or disappear." He'd never back down. The pension fund at that moment sat at $1.4 billion, enough to build half of Las Vegas. Hoffa held the keys. Remove the man, the locks stay, but the keys vanish. And somewhere between pension panic and those shredded ledgers lay the motive strong enough to erase a legend without leaving a corpse. August 17, 1975. Pre-dawn fog rolled over Zug Island's blast furnaces while FBI trucks parked beneath the hulking rail trestle A paid snitch swore Hoffa's body lay inside an abandoned Detroit water and sewer tunnel, mile marker 46B, sealed behind a cinder block wall. Agents in hard hats descended iron ladders slick with condensation, jackhammers echoing like artillery. They punched through the wall, revealing stagnant water, a rusted shopping cart, and piles of slag. No Hoffa. News choppers captured agents emerging coated in gray slime. Evening broadcasts looped the footage, anchors dubbing the attempt Operation Drainpipe. 2 days later, searchers targeted a horse farm, once owned by mob enforcer Carlo Licata, tipped that a backhoe arrived the night of July 30. Locals gathered behind yellow tape as men with ground-penetrating radar swept the paddock. Equipment flagged an anomaly 6 feet down. Crews dug through clay until shovels hit a wooden box. Inside, not a coffin but a stash of stolen slot machines, mob tax write-offs. Reporters christened the dig Hoffa's Horseshoe. The public laughed. Agents ground teeth. September stretched into November with 41 separate digs, drainage pits behind meatpacking plants, a gravel quarry off Telegraph Road, even a backyard barbecue pit belonging to a low-level loan shark named Vince Melly. Each excavation delivered something: spent casings, animal bones, a buried Chevy Impala, but never Hoffa. Bureau accountants tallied costs: $2 million in overtime, concrete, and specialized cadaver dogs. Director Kelly defended the expense before Congress, arguing each failed dig eliminated a theory, tightening the net. Skeptics replied the net was invisible, perhaps imaginary. Underground rumors multiplied. A prison informant claimed Hoffa was ground in a rendering plant and shipped as dog food. Teamster old-timers whispered he was welded inside a 55-gallon drum and dropped in Lake Erie. A Detroit sanitation foreman said mob trucks delivered mystery barrels to a landfill south of the Rouge River the very night Hoffa vanished. The landfill, however, now lay beneath a freshly paved warehouse complex. Engineers estimated excavation would run $5 million, and still missed the target by yards if the barrels shifted under decades of compacted waste. Each dead-end dig planted deeper frustration. For every shovelful of earth, someone sold a new theory. The tunnels stayed dark, the paddocks refilled, and Detroit kept humming over secrets packed beneath asphalt and river silt, while investigators wondered how long a city could keep absorbing holes before the ground finally spat a body back. Winter 1975 turned Washington, D.C. streets into slush rivers, yet inside Teamsters suites at the Madison Hotel, lobbyists glided on warm carpets, trading envelopes for handshakes. Files later leaked to Congress show that 6 weeks before Hoffa disappeared, he filed formal papers requesting full restoration of his union rights, the last step blocked by a clause in President Nixon's 1971 clemency deal. That clause, buried on page 3, stated Hoffa could not engage in the management of any labor organization until 1980. Nixon had signed it at the urging of Attorney General John Mitchell, who in turn fielded quiet calls from senior mob fixers, benefiting from Fitzsimmons's pliable leadership. New rumors suggested that Hoffa's comeback plan included spilling what he knew about secret Teamster donations to Nixon's 1972 re-election fund, cash allegedly hand-carried in brown paper sacks through side doors of the Creep headquarters. Senate investigators subpoenaed White House logs and discovered 4 calls in early July 1975 between Hoffa's lawyer, Frank Regano, and former White House aide Charles Colson, then fresh out of prison for Watergate. Colson, grilled behind closed doors, admitted the calls but swore they were just catching up. Meanwhile, the National Archives revealed a curious gap. Hoffa's clemency file, viewed intact by a junior clerk on August 10, 1975, went missing 2 weeks later. The sign-out sheet bore the initials JB, a code for Justice Department courier runs. The box was never returned. Archivists blamed a misfiled batch. Investigators suspected a shredder. A Freedom of Information lawsuit filed by investigative reporter Dan Moldea dragged through courts until 1981, only to produce a single page: Nixon's blanket denial of further comment on Hoffa. Inside the Detroit field office, Agent Sluss pinned a photo of Nixon beside Provenzano and Giacalone, drawing arrows labeled money and silence. He posited a 3-layer motive. The mob wanted pension control, the Teamster old guard wanted quiet, and political allies wanted distance from dirty cash. Remove Hoffa and everyone slept easier. Yet proving a presidential link required documents now vaporized, phone logs erased, memories pled the fifth. All that remained were faint carbon copies of meetings that might never have happened, and whispers that a threat to expose campaign cash can buy the same price as any mob debt. Paid in the dark, stamped never existed, buried deeper than any body. 9 months after Hoffa vanished, the first potential witness stopped breathing. Marvin the Weasel Elkind, a Teamster go-between turned police informant, was crossing a Windsor street when a van jumped the curb and shattered both his legs. He survived, but spoke no more about a cement mixer outside the Red Fox. The driver was never found. Detective Sluss scribbled "message sent" in his margin notes. Over the next 15 years, the pattern repeated like a grim Morse code. 1977. Salvatore Briguglio, Provenzano's chief enforcer and one of 2 men Hoffa reportedly feared, gunned down on Mulberry Street. 3 shots to the head. Broad daylight, no witnesses. Paramedics found his jacket pockets empty, except for a matchbook advertising the Machias Red Fox. 1979. Louis the Fox, Caruso, rumored getaway driver, suffered a fatal heart attack minutes before entering a Newark grand jury room. Pathologists smelled almonds, traces of cyanide, but tissue samples accidentally thawed before testing. The roster of silence grew. Charles "Chucky" Nicoletti, found in his Camaro with 3 bullets behind his ear. Alan Dorfman, shot in a Chicago hotel parking lot before he could testify on pension loans. Anthony "Tony Provenzano himself, dead of a heart attack in prison, having declined every chance to speak. Each death erased another connect-the-dots line on Agent Sluss's corkboard until the diagram looked like a constellation struck by shotgun pellets. Meanwhile, Hoffa's family waged quiet war. Son James Hoffa filed civil actions to force Teamsters to open pension ledgers. Judges dismissed them as fishing expeditions. Attorney Frank Regano released a memoir claiming he delivered Hoffa's apology note to mob boss Carlos Marcello hours before the disappearance. Marcello's heirs sued for libel, delaying publication, blurring truth with profit. Media kept the embers glowing. 60 Minutes aired 3 specials. Each time hotline calls spiked. Each time tips collapsed under cross-exam. One claimed Hoffa was ice-fished through Lake St. Clair, frozen in a block beneath winter snow. Divers chopped through 8 feet of ice, found only zebra mussels. By 1990, the active FBI task force shrank to a lone agent in a file room thick with stale cigarette smell. The agent's log entry that winter read, "Suspects mostly dead. Witnesses dead or silent. Body absent. Motive undeniable." Detroit kept paving over itself. New strip malls, new roads, layering asphalt on asphalt while somewhere beneath the secret stayed as cold as the Great Lakes in January. Unmarked, yet undeniable, daring the next decade to try again. Spring 2004, Detroit's skyline glinted off the glass of the newly opened MGM Grand when the FBI returned to the century-old Guardian concrete plant on Zug Island. A retired mob trucker, Dominic Dimes Belfiore, on hospice and chasing absolution, told agents he hauled a 55-gallon drum from the Giacalone produce dock the night of July 30th, 1975. Heavy as a man, cold like a freezer, he wheezed. The manifest listed industrial pigment, destination Guardian plant, batch silo 3. Guardian now sat beneath a parking deck, its original silos capped by 2 meters of fresh pour. Engineers deployed diamond-tipped core drills, boring 50 cylinders through crusted aggregate, each plug labeled, flash frozen, shipped to Quantico. There, forensic geologist Dr. Melinda Rourke sliced thin sections, peering for bone shards or hair trapped like insects in amber. Among 50 cores, plug 36 revealed a sliver the width of a fingernail, fibrous, pale, not concrete. Mass spec showed collagen signals. Amino acid racemization suggested human origin. Yet mitochondrial sequencing yielded a degraded profile, 9 loci readable, 3 missing, contamination probable. Comparison with Hoffa's surviving daughter's sample failed, neither confirm nor exclude. Dr. Rourke wrote, "Probable human, indeterminate sex, age," and shipped the shard to the NYU Bone Lab. There, it fractured during decontamination. Chain of custody closed with no further testing possible. Still, the drum story carried momentum. Agents subpoenaed Guardian's 1975 pour sheets, missing. But a 1979 EPA audit mapped a red zone of high phenol waste, matching Silo 3. That zone now lay under Lane B of the parking structure. Demolition would cost $5 million and strand casino revenue for weeks. The city balked. The Bureau lacked budget. A concrete laser imaging firm volunteered to run ground-penetrating muon tomography during off-peak hours. The scan revealed a dense cylinder 1.3 meters tall encased in the slab. Metallic halo consistent with a steel drum. Property lawyers fought over permits until the volunteer funding dried up. The drum remains entombed, 10 meters from blackjack tables. A silent slot where probability says a body could rest, yet bureaucracy keeps the dice from rolling. The media called it Hoffa's concrete coffin. Gamblers parked above, unaware of the maybe beneath their tires, while forensic techs filed away another almost miracle, proof tantalizingly close, sealed by budget lines and hardened cement, reminding everyone that sometimes the truth does not lie 6 feet under, but 6 feet too expensive to reach. For decades, tailgate folklore claimed Hoffa slept beneath the north end zone of Old Giants Stadium, poured into the pylons while concrete trucks idled to watch the game. The story began as a union joke, solidified in a 1989 Playboy interview with mob turncoat Donald "Tony the Greek" Francos, and calcified every time the Jets missed a field goal on that patch of turf. When the stadium fell to wrecking balls in 2010, skeptics cheered. The demolition would prove the tale hollow. Yet crews took only surface soil samples. The concrete subslab stayed intact, destined to support the new American dream complex. Urban myth survived, still untested. Enter 2022. Aging capo Ralph Picardo, serving life in Trenton and betting on medical parole, contacted the FBI. Hoffa was boxed in steel and carted to a Meadowlands landfill bordering the stadium site, then bulldozed under 40 feet of trash the same night. His map, drawn shaky-handed on legal pad, pinpointed Lot 4B. A patch now hosting carnival rides and a log flume pump house. For once, tip timing favored technology. Ground-penetrating ultra-wideband radar could slice through saturated clay in 3D. October 12, 2022, before sunrise, agents rolled in a radar cart disguised as a maintenance buggy. Over 6 hours, they gridded 2 acres, antenna pulses painting subterranean cross-sections in real time. At 11:08 a.m., the monitor showed a rectangular void, 1 meter by 2, resting 4.5 meters down, density signature, metallic. Field techs fist-bumped, cameras clicked. Twitter leaked a single blurry screenshot, #HoffaHump. But ownership of the site belonged to New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority, which demanded court orders before cores could be taken. Lawyers argued radar alone was not probable cause to disrupt millions in holiday revenue. The cart rolled back onto its trailer. The void remained theoretical. By Christmas, Picardo died of kidney failure. Claim untested. Freedom of Information requests for the radar data returned PDFs with the key slice blacked out. Law enforcement sensitive. Conspiracy boards exploded. Some swore the void was refilled overnight with flash-set grout. Others said agents found nothing and redacted embarrassment. What remained verifiable was a line in the FBI activity log. Anomaly detected. Excavation postponed pending funding and NJSEA cooperation. Another lead boxed by paperwork, leaving a steel-shaped silence buried beneath roller coaster screams and neon lights where a football field once held its breath. In March 2023, a 500-page tranche of formerly sealed FBI and CIA memos landed on the National Archives website, part of a routine declassification dump. Buried among Cold War cables, historian Amy Maris spotted 8 pages labeled Hoffa Watch, dated June-August 1975. The memos revealed that CIA's Domestic Contact Service, technically barred from U.S. operations, was tracking mob-linked pension outflows to Caribbean banks. One line leapt out. H may attempt leverage RE Caribbean accounts. Contact with Provenzano scheduled in July. Leverage meant threat. Caribbean accounts meant covert agency money pipelines funding anti-Castro fronts. If Hoffa pried those taps open, Langley had motive to prefer silence, or at least indifference, should the mob resolve the problem first. But the bigger bombshell was audio. A box marked LBJ Library duplicate J. Edgar Hoover private line contained a real mislabeled 1964 speech outtakes. Maris threaded it onto an archivist's Revox. Instead, she heard Hoover in raspy end-of-life voice, dated March 1972, briefing Attorney General Kleindienst, "Jimmy's out. We boxed him with Fitz, but he'll claw back. If he tries to burn the house, Tony Pro will handle. We stand clear." Hoover died weeks later. The reel vanished into limbo until now. Journalists pounced. CNN dedicated a weekend special. Anchors quoted the tape over grainy Hoffa photos. Former FBI brass called it context, not conspiracy, claiming Hoover meant political containment, not a hit. Still, the public heard tacit blessing, federal giants stepping aside while mob muscle tidied loose ends. Congressional aides drafted letters demanding a new inquiry. The Justice Department answered with a polite shrug, statute of limitations long expired for conspiracy to murder. Meanwhile, digital forensics firm SonoraWave volunteered to clean the analog hiss. Their software isolated a faint second voice, unknown male, saying, "It's done in Detroit," just before the tape cuts. Experts debated whether it was spliced from another conversation. Chain of custody now includes a half-century of baseness. Admissibility would crumble in court, yet history rarely requires verdicts to change narratives. The declassified memos and Hoover tape didn't name the gravesite, but they shifted blame from alley gunmen to mahogany desks. If true, Hoffa's last enemy wasn't only the mafia meeting at Red Fox, but an invisible handshake between organized crime and organized power, one able to vanish a man and his paper trail in the same summer storm. January 2024. A startup called Deep Sleuth pitched the FBI a moonshot. Feed every known Hoffa lead, maps, interviews, phone logs, soil chem scans, into a transformer model trained to spot spatial patterns humans miss. Agents uploaded 4 terabytes. The AI spat out a heat map glowing crimson over the edge of a long-abandoned asphalt plant in Melvindale, Michigan. The lot's owner, retired Teamster Benny Marzano, had died the month before. Perfect timing. Armed with LiDAR drones, tech swept the cracked blacktop. A subsurface algorithm flagged a void 2 meters down, rectangular metallic halo. The Bureau filed for a warrant. A TikTok true crime influencer snapped a screenshot of the filing, and by dawn, #Hoffa Hotspot was trending at 3 million views. Excavators arrived under drone swarms, flown by hobbyists, hoping to live stream history. The pit revealed a steel drum, but welded shut only on one end and bone-dry inside, filled with outdated brake shoes. A plant worker admitted tossing scrap in the 70s. AI critics sneered, garbage in, garbage out. Yet the same model pivoted, recommending isotope analysis on storm drain sludge beneath the Red Fox lot. Grad students from Wayne State collected samples. Mass spec found elevated cadmium, trace element, consistent with typewriter ink used in Hoffa's office. A stretch, but enough for headlines. County officials denied core permits, citing groundwater risk. Another digital lead smothered by red tape. Crowd forensics surged anyway. Redditors hired a small sat company for time-lapse thermal shots over 5 suspected sites. Nothing glowed hotter than background, but one frame caught an SUV unloading buckets of lime at 3 a.m. near a closed rendering plant. Police followed, found teenagers dumping deer carcasses. False alarm. Discord groups pooled crypto to rent a ground magnetometer. It shorted out on day 1, fried by buried power cables. Yet each failure acted like caffeine, proof the hunt still pulsed. Old-school detectives watched the frenzy with folded arms. One muttered that clicks won't pry open 40-year lips or dissolve concrete. Still, the data torrent drilled micro-cracks in stories once set like stone. If a single pixel, isotope peak, or late-night livestream squares with that missing 90-minute window, the digital blitz might do what shovels, subpoenas, and Hoover's files could not. Pinpoint the 1 square yard of earth still hiding Jimmy Hoffa's last breath. By mid-2024, the Hoffa Task Force ledger listed 12,200 tips processed, 24 confirmed hoaxes, 56 executed warrants, and $28 million spent since 1975. Enough, one senator quipped, to pave Detroit twice. Congressional auditors questioned the ROI. FBI Deputy Director Carla Vance pushed back. An unsolved icon warps public trust. Solving it is priceless. Yet, morale inside the squad sagged. The most experienced agent retired, his farewell cake shaped like a concrete barrel. Prosecutors weighed closing the case administratively, official language for nobody left to indict. Only 2 living suspects remained. Anthony Tony Palazzolo, wheelchair-bound in Tampa, and Chucky O'Brien, now 90, bedridden and oxygen-tethered. Both lawyers promised filibuster-level delays should any grand jury be convened. DNA standards have tightened. Cross-examination would demolish 40-year-old chain of custody items. The Justice Department drafted a memo. Probability of conviction matchic less 5%. Recommend archival. Victims' rights groups screamed cover-up. The memo leaked. Public radio devoted a week to cold files and cold comfort. Meanwhile, Hoffa's granddaughter Barbara filed a civil petition to declare him officially dead at the Red Fox site, enabling the family to memorialize without a body. She told reporters, "We deserve a stone, even if it marks air." Critics argued a legal death certificate might halt digs by stripping victim status from future search funding. The judge tabled the decision, requesting briefs on public interest versus forensic potential. In Detroit, redevelopment plans threatened one last suspect spot, a disused coal dock on the Rouge River slated for conversion into luxury lofts. Rumors long claimed the dock's pilings hid a weighted box. Developers agreed to delay pile driving 3 months if the FBI produced excavation funds. Congress, citing budget strain, declined. A non-profit true crime podcast crowdfunded $400,000, hiring a dive team whose ionic scanner failed to penetrate decades of slag buildup. The dock deal went forward. Condos pre-sold within weeks, the riverbank sealed behind chic glass, and so the case teeters on a razor. Either close the file with parchments of unanswered questions, or drain the coffers hunting whispers. Every authority, from Union Hall to Hoover's successors, weighs that price, and the ledger of silence keeps balancing itself. Interest compounding with every day, Hoffa remains both somewhere and nowhere at once. Nearly half a century after Jimmy Hoffa slipped beyond the Machus Red Fox doors, his absence has etched a deeper footprint than his presence ever could. The name that once stirred fear in boardrooms now lives as urban shorthand for anything lost without a trace. A socket wrench, an email, a shipment gone missing. His story has become part parable, part punchline, and still a live wire in the American psyche. Labor historians frame Hoffa as the last union leader powerful enough to sway a presidency. Criminologists cite his case as Exhibit A in evidentiary drift. Wait long enough and every lead oxidizes, every witness dies, every paperwork trail grows mold. Law schools teach the Hoffa curve, showing how solvability decays exponentially after the first 48 hours. Even search and rescue algorithms born from this case now help locate earthquake victims by triangulating last known pings. Proof that one man's unsolved end can spawn tools that save others. Families of the missing draw a quieter lesson. They see the Patts and Murray relatives stand beside the Hoffas at candlelight vigils, realizing unresolved grief is its own fellowship. The shared mantra, absence is not closure. Each year on July 30th, Teamster retirees place a single red carnation at the empty booth in the restaurant, now a high-end steakhouse. Tourists snap selfies, unaware the flower marks a war still unended. For you, the viewer, the mystery isn't just folklore. It's an invitation. If you have an old photo from that Detroit summer, a family story about a midnight cement pour, or a ledger page tucked in an attic trunk, share it. One scrap can reset the chessboard. Contact details are in the description. Sources remain confidential. Before you click away, remember, power, money, and silence wrote Hoffa's Vanishing Act, but persistence has chipped at their curtain for 49 years. Watch, comment, spread the word. Each view funds another scan, another core drill, another shot at draining the concrete one more foot deeper. Maybe the next spadeful of dirt or the next line of code will finally settle the debt Jimmy Hoffa left hanging in the Detroit air on that hot July afternoon.